everyone. I'm Kristen Kelleher, a stakeholder engagement manager with Equinor Wind US, and I'll be one of your co-hosts this evening. Also to note before we get started, if you'd like to listen to today's meeting in Spanish, please click the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen. And I'd also like to introduce our other co-host, Tom.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Tom Cunningham. I'm the lead stakeholder responsible for the Beacon Wind project, and I'm really grateful to be with you all today and to talk about this project and to support Kristen, who is leading the effort of our stakeholder engagement in the Northeast. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Tom. So before we get started, let's do a little bit of housekeeping. First, I think I talked about this one, the Spanish interpretation, but here's the visual that we need for that. Second, for housekeeping, if you could stay muted unless you're called upon, that would be really fabulous. Also, if you'd like to speak, if you could please use the raise hands function under reactions and unmute yourself when you're called upon. And then if you could also please use the chat function to respond or ask the questions. And we can follow up with you after the event today if we don't get to them. And then also, just to note, this meeting is being recorded and we'll be sharing the recording on the website. It's just the presentation aspect of it, and we won't be recording the breakout rooms. For us, it's really important that we, get to share this project update with you, but we really want us to have some robust conversations in the breakout rooms, and that won't be recorded. And then we also have our community guidelines here. So if you would, just allow space for everyone to chime in, be respectful for others' opinions. We'll try to do one speaker at a time, and then please contribute. If you, talk a lot, just please be respectful of other individuals. And maybe this is also a chance, if you are a little quieter, to share. And we'd love to hear from all of you. And now we'll get to the project presentation with the agenda. Okay, so getting started on our agenda. So first I'll be introducing Equinor and then giving a project overview, of the Beacon Wind project. And then I'll hand it over to my colleague, Tom, that you've already met, and he'll be giving a cable route update to really, and then he'll be breaking us into our working groups. And also, before we get going, I really do want to highlight that we have a number of very fabulous and talented Equinor team members and specialists here with us today, as well as our friends from CARP Strategies, and here's some of their faces, and you'll get the opportunity to meet them in the breakout rooms as well. But the team represents a wide range of experience here from, our community engagement team, our permitting, fisheries, marine affairs, workforce development. So we're going to have so many really engaging discussions.
Yeah, thank you all for joining us at this, partners alike as well as guests.
Exactly. So I'll get us started and kind of begin by sharing a little bit more about Equinor, the company. So Equinor, we're a broad energy company. Our headquarters is in Norway, and we're in 30 different countries with approximately 20,000 employees worldwide. We've been in the US since the 1980s with an office in Stamford, Connecticut since 1987, something we're really proud of. And Equinor, we have more than a decade of experience in offshore wind globally, and we're an industry leader in a broad array of renewables. And so it's really our ambition to be a leader in the energy transition. And so as you can see on this map here, it's our objective as a company to really deepen that engagement in the energy transition in this region and a number of others. Okay, so this slide right here, it shows our entire US offshore wind portfolio and really kind of gives a snapshot into the co-benefits of this project. So we're going to be going into these in a little bit more detail, but for right now, I just want to share a few key themes. First, the Empire project and the Beacon Wind project are a 50-50 joint partnership with BP, with Equinor as the operator. As you can see in red, we're developing 2 projects, and they'll be supplying power to New York, and that's the Empire Wind 1 and 2 and Beacon Wind 1. Beacon Wind is our focus today. And so together, as you saw from the poll question we started, these projects will supply power to about 2 million homes, and that's about 3.3 gigawatts of renewable energy. And as you can see here, these projects bring, economic and community benefits. This includes the first US wind tower manufacturing facility, as well as the redevelopment of the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal in Brooklyn, and also short-term jobs and long-term jobs as well. And something I wanted to highlight for this audience here this evening is we do have a $25 million fund, and that will support regional monitoring of wildlife and key commercial fish stocks. And we're in the early process of identifying and managing these investments. And so we really look forward to sharing more about them in the coming months. This slide talks a little bit more about our values as a company, and we really do have a clear purpose and vision and strategy, and this really does impact how we do our business and how we develop our projects at Equinor. We're really committed to net zero. We are committed to net zero by 2050, and this will only be able to do that by growing out our renewable portfolio. So it's our ambition to install 12 to 16 gigawatts of renewables by 2030. But for us, it's really not just generating those gigawatts of power. When we think about development, Equinor, we're really thinking about the impacts that we have on communities and how we as a company can have a positive impact on the environment and on economic development and on jobs. And so for us, that really means that we're consistently demonstrating respect for the environment and for the people who are affected by our projects. And so, we try to be transparent, by engaging and communicating actively with stakeholders, with events like this, and, even having these conversations before we have all of the answers. We also seek to minimize our impact on the environment by collaborating with conservation and preservation groups, fisheries, frontline communities, tribal communities, among others. And so we really want to create local jobs, and that includes working with unions and sourcing in the US whenever possible.
And Kristen, if I can just add in, if you don't mind me I'm taking on this sort of the announcer next to you at the basketball game, but I would just also add, we really do recognize at Equinor that we are here delivering an offshore wind project that New York State has solicited from us, or that they'll be buying the power, and what we're delivering is based on we're delivering offshore wind because people pushed the US federal government to help provide this opportunity, and they pushed New York State to purchase it. And so we see ourselves as part of that community, and really we're not just sort of a vendor building a wind project to sell the electrons. We're excited to sell something that is comprehensive, but we're doing it as partners, and it's just one step in the chain to helping meet these shared clean energy and energy transformation and climate change mitigation goals. So that's really sort of sharing that centering about who we are is very important for us today.
Well said, Tom. So to build a little bit on that, Equinor, and other developers were part of creating a new industry, an industry in need of a supply chain. And that should be good news for the local manufacturers and businesses in this region. We're setting up the industry for success by investing in ports and partnering with local businesses. Two of our recent major announcements are right here. The development of the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal and the tower manufacturing facility in Albany, and both will bring short and long-term jobs. So also, in addition to these investments in supply chains and ports, we're also really committed to building the workforce of the future. And so, as we know, this industry will really require skilled workers and infrastructure and input from stakeholders across the East Coast. And so we're really building out our relationships with academic institutions and labor leaders, and really collaborating with universities and research-facing institutions to really kind of broaden the science on offshore wind and identify those local suppliers and focus on an equitable transition as well. And that's a big part of why we're speaking with you here today and seeing avenues where we can work together. So real quick, I'll do a little bit of a project overview and jump in why offshore winds. So just as going over some basics, offshore winds blows stronger and more consistently offshore than it does over land. And the East Coast has some of the best wind resources in the entire world. And so for our projects, these turbines really capture those strong ocean winds and convert it to clean, zero emission electricity. And that's carried through a series of cables to an offshore substation, and then to a substation on land, and then there's distributed to the grid. And I love this picture. And then this slide right here, it talks about kind of the size of our turbines, and our project design envelope includes turbines that can be up to 1,083 feet tall. For the Beacon Wind 1, we're utilizing half of our Beacon Wind lease area. So that's going to be about 82 turbines. It'll be in the 1x1 nautical grid layout, and Equinor collaborated with other, local developers and key stakeholders, really to create a predictable grid so fishermen and maritime users could navigate through the lease area. When we're talking about size, we wanted to create a picture that could give you a scale when you're looking at kind of a cityscape as well. But what's really impressive is, one rotation of a turbine can power a home for approximately 1.5 days as well. And then just kind of getting a little bit more into key facts for Beacon Wind 1. So we just achieved a critical milestone with our purchase and sale agreement in January for Beacon Wind 1, that kind of maroon section right there. And the Beacon Wind 1 project is located about 20 miles off the coast of Nantucket and 60 miles east of Montauk. And as I was saying, it'll occupy the most northern portion of the lease area. But something I also wanted to kind of mention for everyone here today, this kind of gray section right here. So the southernmost half of our Beacon lease area has yet to be subscribed. So we're monitoring East Coast developments and East Coast markets, and the power from Beacon Wind 2 could go anywhere from Massachusetts to New Jersey. And so that development will really depend on securing offtake from a state procurement as well. And so this slide right here, we dig a little bit deeper into the project. And so renewable energy in the lease area. It's delivered via a high voltage direct current, HVDC for short, submarine cable. And so that route goes from our lease area through the Long Island Sound, and it'll interconnect into Astoria, Queens. We have a little bit more of a snapshot right here.
And to be clear, just that green blob, can you go back one slide, please?
Sure.
Sorry, thanks. I just want to also specify the landfall in Astoria will be a single point on that geography. It's on private land and we have to negotiate that, and that has not been concluded. So we're just demonstrating here, anywhere along this space is where the interconnection on land can be. And that will bring it right into the grid at that spot, but that exact spot isn't known yet. Thanks for letting me add that, Kristen.
Of course, and Tom, you'll be taking us a little bit more into the cable route later, and we're looking forward to that too. So I think as Tom was saying, and I think this image really does describe well, it's our interconnection point, into Astoria, Queens. The precise cable landing and substation aren't finalized, and they'll be using that private land as Tom was saying, which will really minimize, onshore routing and impact to the public. In this image, we're not developing our own floating islands, don't worry. But the box right there is just to kind of give you an idea of the possible layout of what the substation will look like. And that was that green section that Tom was talking about in the last slide. And that will be somewhere on lands. And then right here, it's a little sketch of our project timeline. And so right now we're wrapping up a phase of really extensive studies and surveys of the lease area and the cable route. And that's really working to understand the wind and the water conditions, as well as marine and wildlife behavior and seabed conditions at the site and along the cable route. And so also looking to 2022 this year will be really important, as we'll be filing state and federal regulatory approvals that are really needed for construction. And our construction date, as you can see here, is projected to be in 2025. And we plan to generate our first power in 2028. But I'll hand it over to Tom now, and Tom, feel free to say slide when you're ready to dig in a little bit more.
Sounds good. Yeah, and I wanted to sort of also, I guess, explain a little bit. I want to go into we want to talk a little bit about the cable route in some detail here, because this meeting, you can go to the next slide. Thanks. This meeting, obviously, we're trying to focus on communities in Western Connecticut. And you may ask, why does this project matter to me if I'm in Connecticut, but the power is going to New York? Well, again, like we mentioned before, we will be operating in waters in the Long Island Sound and in federal waters off Nantucket and Montauk, and bringing this power through. We think this is an overall benefit for Connecticut in terms of bringing the U.S. Northeast closer to its clean energy goals overall. It will bring impacts in the supply chain and jobs and other things, but we also wanted to go into some detail. I'm sorry, can you go to the slide that shows the cable route? That's the one. Thanks. I wanted to stress to this community that we want to be very open about our project and be very mindful of concerns or equities that our communities in Western Connecticut may have with regard to the cable running through Long Island Sound. So out of our spirit, our values of being open, we're going to talk about that here very quickly. So as you can see, the yellow shape is the lease area that we'll be operating in. And then that blue line is the export cable, a high voltage direct current cable that will run through federal waters, including the purple, which is the federal waters of the Rhode Island Special Area Management Plan. And then in Long Island Sound, it will be entirely in New York waters, and then going into the East River into Astoria. But next slide, please. Oh, can you go to the one that talks about the CTNEER? That's it. Thanks. So, and to be fair, I changed the order on Kristen 10 minutes before we started. So she's fully prepared. It's just me. But to say, we want to emphasize that Connecticut really values the Long Island Sound and has many processes in place to ensure it is utilized well by all users with respect for users and for the ecology. And we recognize that, and in particular wanted to flag the Blue Plan and the importance that it has to be an inclusive and comprehensive process with a lot of leadership from different stakeholders in Connecticut, including the government and University of Connecticut, the Nature Conservancy, and others. And we're very mindful about this process, about transparency and being extremely inclusive, a lot of meetings and input from the public and from experts so that there can be really accurate information about the sound that everyone can access. And this plan is helping to guide our plans for our cable route. And it is an important resource for us to ensure that what we're doing is compatible with that vision that the Blue Plan is helping to ensure for the sound. And we also recognize the designation by the federal government of the Connecticut National Estuarine Research Reserve, or the NER. And we have a dialogue that we plan to continue with the federal agency DEEP, with the University of Connecticut and the Nature Conservancy and other stakeholders to really understand and do right by this designation. Next slide. Thanks. So our proposed route selection is being developed in a way to utilize minimal onshore disruption and draw upon lessons learned from past pipeline and cable installations in the Sound. We're doing everything we can to select a location of the route to minimize impacts and to minimize disturbance. The cable route and the cable that we are proposing, and again, it's subject to approval by by New York officials at what's called the Article 7 plan, and we'll come back to that. So we all, in full humility, appreciate that this is a permitting process that we need to achieve. But we want to deliver power to these millions of consumers in New York with minimal disturbances onshore and to a location in Astoria, Queens, that is completely contained on private land that's been previously industrialized. That'll have a lot of minimal onshore impacts. And those of you who follow issues related to energy transmission and know how fraught it is, we're excited to find a route that minimizes these offshore impacts. That's not to say we're not worried about any onshore impacts. Not to say we're not worried about impacts in the water, but we are applying fully our activities in accordance with federal and state permitting processes and in alignment with New York State and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to install the cable route in a specified corridor. And the line of our cable will take within this permitted corridor would represent what you're seeing in our lines in these images is our most refined assessment of that most suitable route for the cable. There'll be areas where we need to be quite precise, and that will involve crossing existing assets, meaning a pipeline or another cable. And we anticipate 8 crossings based on the assets that are currently installed in the Sound. And again, to specify, our agreement with New York State, the purchase and sales agreement for the electricity, specifies the beacon would deliver into the New York ISO grid at zone J, meaning it's not feasible to bring it in closer, say in Massachusetts or Connecticut, because that's in the New England ISO, and this power must go to the New York ISO. Next slide. Jeffrey McChesney, I'm taking note of your comment here quickly. Oh, we'll give you contact information at the end of this deck, but short answer is contact me and Kristen. Okay, let's see. So here's an image that I think is important to show the existence of cables and pipelines that are already in the Sound and that we've worked to follow the existing route of one where we can. So again, our blue route is one of many other features of installed things in Long Island Sound. Next slide. Here is a very technical picture, but what we're bringing is a high voltage direct current cable, HVDC, as opposed to AC, DC. No, yes, HVAC. Sorry, so it's direct current instead of alternating current, but that allows fewer runs, so lower impact in terms of the installation impacts, and it'll be buried in a trench that is dug specifically for it, and then the little piles will be, then sort of be buried in that trench with very clear specifications of depths from 3 to 6 feet throughout, and where we have to have them in where they can't be bundled or where they can't run together, they'll be put in separate trenches. For example, if there's some feature underwater where you don't have the option to have them right next to each other, then they can be split with very specific distances and consistency. So that's the cable installation. Next slide. Okay, and on to public engagement. And this is also why we're here, not just to, well, in addition to talking to you about our project, we also want to talk to you about the public processes that help govern how these projects get built according to federal and state requirements. And we're doing this with you and all stakeholders to ensure sort of 3 tenets here, right? 1, minimizing impacts to wildlife and communities through careful research and evaluations. Minimizing impacts for fishing areas and activities by consistently engaging with local fisheries. And we have 2 of our colleagues who do this every day on our team joining us tonight. And thirdly, to mitigate any interference with potential national defense concerns and other national security concerns through the right federal agencies, BOEM and DOD. Next slide. Here real quickly, talking about a lot of concerns about offshore wind or about wind is impacts to birds. And we can go into great detail if you like in the breakout sessions, but wanted to sort of discuss that, we know shorebirds are critically important to the local community. So some of the things that we're doing here are some of the things we're doing to develop a responsible project. National Audubon Society, I have a quote from them saying they support offshore wind energy and transmission that is sited and operated properly to avoid, minimize, and mitigate effectively for the impact on birds, other wildlife, and the places they need. Just mentioning that some of those groups that are most considerate and most interested in the welfare of birds support offshore wind provided it's done right, and we're working to ensure that ours is done right. So I can read through these, but maybe I'll just be quiet for a minute so folks can just absorb it. It's hard for me because I love to talk. So in short, through our site planning and design, through our permitting and construction processes, and then through the life of the project when it's operated and maintained, we are building in processes to minimize and mitigate potential disruptions to birds, including migratory birds and shorebirds. Okay, next slide.
Sorry, Tom.
Don't worry.
There we go.
As long as you don't run off and leave the room. Another point, it's a specific issue of concern, is impact on fisheries. And for us, this is all about engagement and how can we operate together in these waters for the mutual benefit of all, and how can we operate in a way that really respects this really important and historically significant and economically significant part of our community. And through this, we have many strategies in terms of our engagement. That's the box on the right. port hours, utilizing scout boats to contract and engaging with fishermen while we're doing offshore work, partnering with representatives, pushing information out about our activities all the time, modifying our survey schedules as needed, our activities based on fishing conditions and other concerns, monitoring the lease areas actively, using a lot of spatial planning and adaptive management to understand and avoid high sensitivity areas, and funding studies and developing partnerships. Elizabeth, I see you've jumped in just to show your face. Introduce yourself if you don't mind and talk a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Tom. No, just want to jump in, show my face. Fishery Liaison Officer for Beacon Wind and Empire, another project that we have, and working with the commercial fishing industry full time. I'm a fisherman and field scientist myself, so we've been working with the community for over 20 years. So, and I was also the Black Island Wind Farm Fishery Liaison. So I am here and welcome your calls and concerns and questions. So thanks for your time and looking forward to the discussion earlier.
Awesome. Elizabeth, if you want, you can put your contact information in the chat, but you don't have to. But you may have some
final slide. Don't worry.
Thanks. Next slide.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. And again, we want to be talking early. So our project is not going to be operational until 2028, and construction won't happen until all the permitting is approved, which would be around 2025. But we want to start talking now and sharing information about what we're doing. And we're doing that through close engagement with key partners like environmental NGOs and government agencies and landowners and others, but also in public fora, including community meetings, webinars. And so we have another one, which at this point is in person, although we're watching the COVID issues closely, at the Mystic Aquarium on May 24th. And we're really open to feedback and input from everybody. You can follow us on Twitter at Equinor Wind US. We have a newly upgraded website called beaconwind.com, and you can sign up for updates there, and you can follow what we're doing. And we look forward to staying in close touch with you as this project moves along, and welcome your support for it, of course. Okay, so that's sort of the end of this presentation. So this is kind of where we get to step off the stage and break out into small groups. And just so that I do it properly, Zainab, you're a facilitator here. Would you mind jumping in and talking a little bit about how the breakouts will go? I might be putting you on the spot, but you'll be better at explaining this orchestration.
No problem. I think, Kristen, if you can just go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wonderful. So as Tom mentioned, we're really interested in hearing everyone's thoughts today. And with that, want to make sure that we have time to hear you and see you on this call. And so in a few moments, I'll be splitting everyone into smaller breakout sessions. So you'll see a box pop up and just click accept when you're prompted. And hopefully we'll have about 35 to 40 minutes of breakout room discussion time where you'll be given 2 discussion prompts. So the first thing is kind of what questions you have about the information that Tom and Kristen just shared. And we'll do kind of the round robin to see, to just gather your feedback and thoughts. And then towards the second half of that session, we're curious to learn about really what's important to you and what you value about your community and how Equinor's projects can fit in with those values and needs. And then we'll have time towards the end of the meeting for everyone to report back into the main room and share back on what was discussed in each of the breakout rooms. And that's how it'll go.
Yeah, so please be forthcoming, be open, ask questions, share your views, ask our experts, see if they can prove that they're experts. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Opening all rooms.
Thanks.